A group of men are out in the wilderness, casually hunting deer deep in the forest. The animals they catch are not only used for food, but also for their fur, because in the 1800s, thick animal pelts are a very valuable commodity. Unfortunately, while they are relaxing at their campsite, they are suddenly attacked by a Native American tribe. Even though the tribesmen only use traditional weapons, they are incredibly skilled in combat. One by one, the hunters are taken down by arrows that seem to come out of nowhere. Instead of trying to stand and fight, they decide their best chance of survival is to run for it and reach a boat waiting at the far end of the river. The problem is, the attacks keep coming, getting more aggressive, and they are forced to defend themselves without any real preparation. Struggling and panicking, the men finally manage to scramble onto the boat. They make sure to bring their precious cargo, loading all the pelts on board before pushing off. At first, they assume the tribe attacked them to steal the furs, but that guess turns out to be completely wrong. The real reason for the chaos is that the tribal chief is searching for his daughter, who has reportedly been kidnapped by hunters. Their real fight for survival has just begun. This is the Revenant. It is the year 1823, and boats with engines are still extremely rare. Their speed now depends entirely on how strong or weak the river current is. This hunting party is led by a wealthy man named Captain Henry. For this expedition, he has hired a local guide, a quiet and experienced man named Hugh. After observing the situation, Hugh realizes that if they keep following the river all the way down, none of them will make it out alive. The area ahead has already been surrounded by the tribe. Like it or not, they will have to stop in the middle of the journey, get off the boat, and continue on foot through a different route. One of the hunters, a know-it-all named John, keeps mocking this plan, saying it only makes their escape harder. But as captain, Henry decides to trust Hugh and follow his guidance. The pelts they took from the hunt are extremely heavy, and there is no way they can carry them while trying to flee for their lives. So they decide to hide the furs along the riverbank and come back for them later when things are safe. Hearing this decision makes John even more furious. He starts cursing and shouting, and it gets worse when he openly accuses Hugh of betraying them by revealing their location to the tribe. He dares to say that because Hugh's late wife was a native woman. Hugh even has a son named Hawk who has joined this hunting trip. So when Hawk hears his family being insulted, he cannot hold back his anger. That night, Hawk quietly cries, forced to watch his father being humiliated over and over by John. As a father, Hugh tries to calm him down and reminds him to be patient. The next morning, Hugh's prediction proves to be true. The tribe has already set up an ambush at the end of the river. If they had insisted on staying in the boat and sailing straight through, none of them would have survived. To get back to the fort, Hugh and the others now have to travel for about 2 weeks through forests and mountains. As their guide, Hugh wakes up earlier than everyone else each morning to scout ahead and find the safest path. But on this particular morning, his luck runs out. While walking through a strangely quiet part of the woods, he is suddenly attacked by a massive bear. The animal rips into him, leaving his body torn and mangled. But even through the unbearable pain, Hugh tries to stay calm and play dead. Bears often like to toy with their prey, and he is hoping it will eventually lose interest. When the bear's attention drifts for a moment, Hugh quietly reaches for his gun and takes a shot. Unfortunately, the bullet only hits the bear's shoulder and is not enough to bring it down. This time, the bear charges at him with full fury. Once again, Hugh forces himself not to move, letting the bear think he is already dead. While lying there, he slips a hand toward the knife in his pocket, and then, with whatever strength he has left, he prepares to fight for his life one more time. Not long after the attack, Captain Henry and the others finally find Hugh, guided by the sound of his gunshot. His condition is shocking. His body is torn apart, and it looks like survival is nearly impossible. Instead of being relieved, John complains. According to him, Hugh should never have fired a gun because the sound could attract the tribe back to them. Hearing that makes Hawk furious, but there is nothing he can do. Captain Henry works quickly, stitching up Hugh's wounds as best he can. At the same time, the Arikara tribe reaches a group of French soldiers and begins trading the stolen pelts. The tribe asks for 5 horses in return. It becomes clear that these people are not as primitive as the hunters assumed. They negotiate intelligently and with purpose. Their earlier attack was not just violence, it was retaliation. Their land has been invaded, their people harmed, and many of their daughters have been taken, abused, and abandoned in the wilderness. Even while barely hanging on to life, Captain Henry refuses to give up on Hugh. To him, Hugh is injured because he was trying to guide and protect the group, so he orders everyone to take turns carrying him, no matter how difficult the journey becomes. Hugh is awake, but he cannot move or speak. Some of the men whisper that it would be easier if he died so they would not have to drag him across frozen terrain. But Captain Henry insists they continue. Eventually, after climbing hills buried in snow and losing strength step by step, the group can no longer continue with the same plan. They are exhausted and freezing. Captain Henry starts considering the unthinkable. Ending Hugh's suffering might be the most merciful choice, but Hawk refuses to accept it. He stays beside his father, choosing to be with him until the very end. In the end, Captain Henry cannot bring himself to pull the trigger. Instead, he makes an offer. Anyone willing to stay with Hugh until his final breath will receive $100, a small fortune at the time. Hawk stays, of course. A young hunter named Bridger decides to stay too, even without payment. Then John volunteers as well. Not because he cares, but because he sees an opportunity to claim the full reward for himself. Captain Henry does not fully trust him and warns him repeatedly to take proper care of Hugh. The rest of the group continues the journey, leaving Hugh with Hawk, Bridger, and John to wait out his final days in the forest. Night after night, Hugh is trapped inside his own mind, remembering the brutal massacre that took his wife's life and scarred his son. The attackers were not tribesmen, they were American soldiers, and Hugh could do nothing to stop it. His past love for a native woman stands in complete contrast to John's hatred. John still carries trauma from being scalped alive. He survived, but the experience left him bitter and half-bald. One afternoon, Hawk and Bridger go out searching for food, leaving John alone with Hugh. Instead of caring for him, John tries to pressure him into giving up and dying, claiming it would protect Hawk before the Arikara tribe arrives. While John is attempting to end Hugh's life, Hawk suddenly returns and catches him in the act. Panic sets in, and Hawk desperately tries to call for help, but Bridger is still down by the river collecting water.
Get away! You okay, Jim?
Hawk keeps shouting, refusing to step back or stay quiet, and John silences him permanently. Hugh witnesses the entire moment, unable to move, speak, or protect his own son. A short while later, Bridger returns and immediately notices something is wrong. Hawk is nowhere to be seen. John lies without hesitation, claiming Hawk must have gotten lost while hunting. In reality, the body is hidden somewhere in the woods. The next morning, John claims the Arikara tribe will pass by in just a few minutes and casually suggests Hawk may have died while hunting. Even in fear and confusion, Bridger insists Hugh should not be abandoned. John grows impatient, drags Bridger to the half-dug grave they prepared earlier, and forces him to bury Hugh alive. Bridger goes along with it, not because he agrees, but because he fears he will be next. Before leaving, he quietly sets his water flask beside Hugh as a silent apology. The following day, with unimaginable pain running through his body, Hugh forces himself upright. His leg is still broken from the bear attack, so walking is impossible. He crawls across the frozen ground searching for his son. After a long struggle, he finally finds Hawk's lifeless body. At the same time, Bridger begins realizing that John's story keeps changing. Details never line up, including the number of Arikara warriors supposedly chasing them. He confronts John, and eventually John admits the truth. It is too late to undo what happened, so both of them agree to keep Hugh's death a secret to protect themselves. With his grief buried deep inside, Hugh begins focusing on survival. He gathers anything useful from the forest, including the bear pelt from earlier. It becomes one of his most important tools, helping him hold on to warmth in freezing temperatures. For food, he scavenges whatever he can find, even old animal carcasses. Water becomes the hardest resource to reach. The nearest river lies downhill, and crawling across uneven terrain is excruciating. To make things worse, every sip causes blood to leak from the wound in his throat. The stitches were rushed, and to stop the bleeding, Hugh burns the wound shut with heated ember and pure willpower. Meanwhile, without Hugh guiding them, Captain Henry and the remaining group lose their sense of direction. Winter is closing in fast, and their situation grows more uncertain. Hugh eventually finds shelter in a small cave near the river. It gives him water access and at least some protection from the cold. He eats whatever he can find, even dry grass, just to keep his body functioning. But danger is never far. One day, the Arikara tribe passes near his hiding place. Too weak to run, Hugh has only one option. He lets the current pull him into the freezing river and lets it carry him away. The escape nearly kills him. When he finally drags himself to the riverbank, his clothes are soaked, the wind is brutal, and temperatures are below freezing. One wrong move now means death, and yet somehow he continues to survive. On the other side of the wilderness, John and Bridger continue their journey, and along the way they stumble upon a devastated native settlement. It has been wiped out by American soldiers. In the ruins, they find two surviving horses and immediately take them to speed up their travel. Time passes. We are not told how long, but eventually we see Hugh standing again, now with the help of a makeshift walking stick. He has survived by fishing along the river, using whatever method he can manage. After days without proper food, he becomes so desperate that he even eats the fish raw. One night while resting, he hears a faint sound in the distance. When he follows it, he finds a native man eating fresh bison meat. Driven by hunger and exhaustion, Hugh approaches him. By morning, the man introduces himself as Hugh. After listening to Hugh's story and learning what happened to his family, he takes pity on him. Instead of leaving, he invites Hugh to travel with him. With a horse now available, Hugh no longer has to drag his broken body through the snow alone. But the wound on his shoulder is still open and refuses to heal. Without proper treatment, infection could set in and kill him long before winter does. Meanwhile, John and Bridger finally reach the fort. Before they go inside, John warns Bridger to stay silent about Hugh. When they report to Captain Henry, John confidently spins a heroic story, making Hugh's death sound honorable and unavoidable. Captain Henry praises them both, but Bridger becomes visibly uncomfortable, disgusted by John's lies. Back in the wilderness, Hugh's health takes another turn. His fever rises and the weather grows harsher by the day. To keep him alive, Hickok builds a shelter from branches to protect him from the storm and treats his wounds using traditional medicine. The fever becomes so intense that Hugh briefly loses consciousness. At one point, he even dreams of seeing his son, believing his life is about to end. But the next morning, Hugh wakes up stronger. The fever breaks and the treatment works. When he looks around, Hugh is nowhere to be found. Concerned, Hugh searches the area and soon discovers Hugh hanging from a tree. A wooden sign nearby makes it clear he was killed, most likely by American soldiers. Not far from the body, a group of hunters relax by their campfire. Hugh watches them for almost an entire day, studying their movements and waiting for a chance to get his horse back. But before he can act, he notices something worse. A native woman has been captured and is being abused by the men. Hugh cannot ignore it. Driven by instinct and empathy, he steps in and rescues her. With the hunters distracted, he quietly retrieves his horse and prepares to escape. But before the woman can join him, the men notice what happened. Chaos breaks out, and the two of them are forced to flee in opposite directions. While Hugh fights for survival out in the frozen wilderness, life continues elsewhere. On New Year's Eve, Captain Henry and the rest of his men relax inside a warm bar, celebrating and enjoying drinks. The mood is light and cheerful until John breaks it with a blunt question. He wants to know when they are returning to retrieve the pelts they left behind. Even though he has already received a generous payment, his greed is far from satisfied. Deep down, he also knows that if they wait too long, the truth about Hugh will eventually surface. So before anyone starts asking questions, John wants one last payday, then plans to disappear into another town. Meanwhile, miles away, Hugh wakes to the sound of galloping horses. The same bandits from before have tracked him down, and this time they come prepared. During the escape attempt, Hugh focuses on firing back and doesn't notice a cliff edge ahead. He falls, crashing through branches before finally getting caught on one that saves his life. Night arrives with another brutal snowstorm, and there is no time or strength left to build a fire. To stay alive, Hugh does something desperate. He cuts open the stomach of his dead horse, removes the insides, and crawls inside the carcass to stay warm until morning. When the sun rises, he climbs out, covered in blood but still breathing. Against all odds, he continues his journey alone, walking across endless snow in silence. Most people would have given up long ago, but Hugh holds on to one thing, the promise of avenging his son. Days later, the lone surviving hunter from the group chasing him finally reaches Captain Henry's fort. Out of 9 men, he is the only one left. The rest were attacked and killed by wolves. While explaining what happened, the man pulls out a water flask. It is the same one Bridger left behind for Hugh. Everyone is shocked. John had insisted Hugh was dead, and claimed Hawk was simply lost. The flask proves otherwise. Captain Henry wastes no time. He orders every man available to search the forest and find Hawk. By the time they arrive at the search area, night has already fallen. They continue anyway, and when they finally find someone alive, it is not Hawk. It is Hugh. The truth hits the group hard. John lied, Hawk is dead, and Hugh survived. The next morning, Captain Henry rides back to the fort and immediately orders John's arrest. But John is already gone. Not only has he escaped, he has stolen every dollar from the captain's locked safe. The betrayal sends Henry into a rage, and he lashes out at Bridger, assuming he helped. Hugh steps in and defends the young man. He knew John would run the moment they reached safety, and he reminds the others that Bridger only followed orders. At this point, Hugh knows there is only one person who can bring justice for his son, and that person is himself. Captain Henry tries to convince him to stay at the fort and recover, while someone else tracks down John. But Hugh refuses. After everything he has survived, he is determined to finish this with his own hands. The next morning, Hugh and Captain Henry set out together to follow John's trail. Tracking him is not difficult. A man running with stolen money rarely risks open roads. He hides in the forest, far from towns and people. Soon enough, the trail confirms it. John has gone deep into the wilderness. It takes an entire day and night of tracking before they finally spot smoke rising from a hill in the distance. Someone is camped there, and the timing is too much to be a coincidence. To prevent John from escaping, they decide to split up and approach from two sides. But as Hugh circles the hill, disaster strikes. Captain Henry steps into a trap. John is waiting, and with a single gunshot, Henry falls. Captain Henry dies brutally, alone in the snow. John escapes once again, but now the chase becomes personal. Hugh refuses to leave the body behind. He continues forward, dragging Henry's remains with him, vowing to finish what he started. Along the way, Hugh begins preparing a plan. He gathers branches and shapes them into something useful. Before long, John returns and launches a surprise attack. Gunfire erupts, echoing through the forest. John takes a bullet to the shoulder, but manages to flee deeper into the trees. They continue exchanging shots until both run out of ammunition. John retreats toward the river, bleeding heavily. Realizing he has no more tricks and nowhere left to run, he makes his final stand. The fight becomes brutal. Hugh strikes first, injuring John's hand badly enough to sever two fingers. John fights back, stabbing Hugh in the leg and biting off part of his ear. The struggle is desperate, violent, and primal. In the end, Hugh overpowers him and stabs him repeatedly. John collapses, barely clinging to life. Just as Hugh prepares to end it, the sound of horses fills the air. The Arikara warriors arrive. Instead of delivering the final blow himself, Hugh steps back and leaves John lying there. For him, this is a more fitting end. John will die at the hands of the very people he feared and mistreated. The chief spares Hugh. The woman he rescued earlier is his daughter, and this act of kindness has now returned to him in the form of mercy. With John gone and Captain Henry avenged, Hugh finally stops running. The long road of survival and revenge comes to an end. His son can rest, and so can he. So the moral of the story is, if you bully the quiet guy, talk too much, steal stuff, and fight a bear, life will absolutely clap you in the worst way possible. So maybe just mind your business and don't kidnap people.